Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Welcome if you're new. And thank you for joining your favorite lawyer from the land down under, far, far away. I'd also like to thank my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. Your support is what enables me to set aside time from my very busy workload to make videos. So you have no idea how much your support enables the continuation of this channel. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you from the depths of my heart. And here are some Leo kisses for you because he is ever so grateful to you as well. If you would also like to support the channel and help me make more timely videos by quitting the day job maybe, then feel free to join us over on Patreon or YouTube members. The link to Patreon is in the description box below. If you tune into our podcast format, you would remember me saying that I wouldn't allow this week to be quiet because I had a bunch of videos pre-filmed, pre-edited, and pre-uploaded waiting on YouTube because I knew I had a very busy week ahead of me, 12-hour work days. I'm doing my second master's degree and my second semester has just started. However, all of these videos were about the Brooks versus Depp case, which, as we all know, was settled. Yes, on the 11th of July, the court received a notice of settlement, meaning the case will not proceed to trial unless Brooks, as the plaintiff, files a declaration as to why the court shouldn't dismiss the case by February of next year. If this declaration is not filed, then the case will be well and truly dismissed. Over, case closed. So over the past week, I have received 2 questions at least 50 times. These 2 questions are, number 1, will we ever see the terms of the settlement? And number 2, does a settlement mean that Johnny Depp was liable? One of the videos I pre-recorded last week before the case was settled was looking at the complaint and going through all 10 causes of action, explaining what needs to be proven, and also letting you know what I think about the prospects of the case in general. To avoid letting that entire video go to waste, I've decided to put it in the midst of this video as a background, as an explanation of what this case was all about. So how I'm gonna structure this video is I'm gonna start off with the background of the case, and when that's concluded, I'll let you know what Johnny's version of events were, very briefly, which includes a witness statement from the script supervisor who was on location and right there during the altercation. And we're gonna end it off with talking about the settlement and the 2 questions that I outlined earlier in the video. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of concerns right now about how Amber Heard's camp are gonna twist this entire settlement and use it against Johnny. If you're not interested in the background facts of the case, then feel free to skip ahead to the timestamp listed in the description box. It should come up as a chapter as well. But if you don't know much about this case, I do recommend that you watch this upcoming portion. Thanks, and I'll see you soon. So, right from the get-go, it's pretty clear that Mr. Brooks is not happy. As you can see on the screen, there are 10 causes of action. And yes, we'll be going through them one by one, looking at the elements that must be proven in order for Brooks to win his case. Now, as I said, Johnny Depp is but one of many defendants in this case. It's also interesting to note that Johnny's production company, Infinitum Nihil, is being sued in this case as well, in addition to defendants that the plaintiff isn't familiar with. So he doesn't know their names according to his complaint. And so they're listed as Does 1 to 50. So you know how you get the John Doe, Jane Smith, the typical kind of moniker when you don't know someone's name or when someone wants to be anonymous, usually in SA cases involving minors, for example. All right, so I have to tell you right from the get-go, Mr. Brooks reminds me of Amber Heard in the sense that he seems to have done absolutely nothing wrong, and Johnny just went berserk on him for absolutely no reason. All of these allegations seem incredibly far-fetched. Upon first reading, I approach cases with an open mind. I'm very open to the possibility of seeing fault with Johnny Depp. I'm not some blind fangirl that thinks he can do no wrong. But yes, I just get this vibe of, wow, a lot of exaggeration and a complete denial of any wrongdoing whatsoever. So if that seems familiar, It probably is. So the incident that Johnny and the other defendants are being sued over took place in 2017 on the set of a movie called City of Lies that Johnny was involved with. Mr. Brooks was the location manager on the set of that film. As location manager, it was part of Mr. Brooks' responsibilities to make sure that the production and the set are complying with any of the requirements that are contained within the permit. So every set and every movie and every production company gets a permit that they have to abide by, and this includes what time they can start filming and what time they have to be done. In the case of this movie and in this set, they were permitted to start filming at 7 a.m. and to finish by 10 p.m. So what kickstarted this string of events is the producer approaching Mr. Brooks and asking if they could extend the hours during which they can film on set. An extension was actually granted for that one night, but it turns out they needed even more time, and so Mr. Brooks was asked to extend the permit once again. This second extension was also obtained, but it turns out they still needed more time. When Mr. Brooks informed the director and the set that they were approaching the deadline, the director, Mr. Furman, allegedly said, "Why don't you try telling that to Johnny Depp?" Now, it's important to note that Johnny's capacity, as per this complaint, is just as an actor. He wasn't the director. And so Mr. Brooks states that he felt no need to ask Johnny for permission. Here's when things start to get a little too dramatic very early on, before Mr. Brooks even approached Johnny. And this is what raises red flags or alarm bells. With no apparent prior history or a negative contact with Johnny Depp, for some reason, Mr. Brooks decides to approach a police officer to ask him for protection before talking to Johnny Depp in case Johnny decided to become violent. Again, bear in mind, he doesn't allege any prior contact with Johnny that seemed to indicate that Johnny would have lashed out or would have been violent towards him. He didn't feel the need to be protected by the officer when he spoke to the director or the producer, or according to the complaint, anyone else for that matter, other than Johnny Depp. We all know from the trial now that Johnny Depp does not have a reputation of being a violent person, not in the movie industry, nor in his personal life. But of course, this was filed in July 2018, before the defamation trial took place this year in Virginia. So I do wonder how apprehensive Mr. Brooks might be feeling after the outcome of that trial. And because I get this question a lot, in case you're wondering, no, Johnny cannot sue Mr. Brooks for making these allegations against him because he's protected by absolute privilege. Anything you say in judicial proceedings, which includes depositions and witness statements and filing complaints, cannot be used against you and cannot be used as a grounds for defamation unless they are repeated outside of these judicial proceedings. So, according to Mr. Brooks, before he could even reach the police officer, Johnny started to attack Mr. Brooks. So the way this is written is they hadn't even started speaking yet. Johnny just started to lash out and go crazy. Mr. Brooks, ever the professional, remained calm and, as he says, professional. And his response was to explain who he was and that it was part of his responsibilities to make sure that the permits were abided by. In response, Johnny allegedly continues to scream at him, telling him that he didn't give an F who he was and that, again, he couldn't tell him what to do. And this is where Mr. Brooks alleges that Johnny punched him. Not once, but twice in the lower left side of his ribcage. And despite all this, Mr. Brooks continued to remain calm and maintain his composure. This apparently wasn't the reaction that Johnny wanted, and so he tried to provoke him, allegedly yelling that he would give Mr. Brooks $100,000 to punch him in the face. Mr. Brooks continued to not engage and not react, which only fueled Johnny's anger, until things got so bad that Johnny's bodyguards allegedly had to extract him from the area. And according to Mr. Brooks, Johnny had been using and drinking on set that day. The incident ends with Mr. Brooks going back to set on the following Monday morning, and he was allegedly asked by the producer to write and sign a declaration not to sue the production. When he refused, he was allegedly fired. Based off the complaint itself, I just found that Mr. Brooks had a lot to prove. Everything seemed very far-fetched, very out of character, And he also contradicts himself in his own deposition. Here is a clip from Johnny's deposition from back in September 2019 in relation to this case.
11 p.m. where it says where I stepped in to remind Mr. Brooks that was not proper set etiquette, and that he would. We don't have time for this, you know. And so that's at 11. At 10:45, it says he's flipped somebody off, aggressively getting in his face, and then the guy spoke to him and said to take a breather. I don't think he took a breather.
While we don't get much from that deposition itself, we get a general idea of Johnny's version of events. I also made a video going through his entire answer, so his defense, and he was relying on 41 different defenses, by the way. So yes, that video is also obsolete now. However, I want to get to two important pieces of evidence that support Johnny's version much more so than Mr. Brooks. First is the declaration of Emma Danoff, who was a script supervisor, as I said, who was on location that day, and who not only witnessed what happened, but also took 40 time-stamped photographs of the incident. Ms. Danoff says that at 7 p.m. on April 12, 2017, she photographed Johnny while meeting with homeless individuals who were on the street where they were filming the movie City of Lies. The photograph shows Johnny speaking with a small group of homeless individuals, and he gave them money and gifts. So right off the bat, this description from Ms. Danoff of Johnny's personality is very much consistent with the descriptions that we've heard from multiple witnesses who've known him in some instances for decades during the Virginia trial. Whereas Mr. Brooks's account of Johnny's personality was very much out of character and very far-fetched. Ms. Danoff continues and states that Rocky Brooks encountered an African-American homeless woman about 25 feet from where she was sitting with Johnny. Mr. Brooks loudly and aggressively berated the woman with racial and derogatory slurs for being in his presence and in his way, and he was pissed she was unable to follow his commands. I heard most of Mr. Brooks's unkind words to her, and Mr. Depp also heard it. He immediately stood up and went over to Brooks to stand up for the woman. Johnny exchanged words with Mr. Brooks in this manner for approximately 20 seconds, as confirmed by my photographs, and then he came and sat back down at 11:09 p.m., as confirmed by the time-stamped photographs. There were no punches or shoves. There was no offer of $100 grand to punch Mr. Depp. They were close to each other, but Mr. Depp never touched Mr. Brooks. I remained 10 feet away from the incident during its short duration. Again, from what little we saw from that deposition clip, this completely aligns with Johnny Depp's version of events. Now, it's worth noting that Johnny was merely an actor on that set, as far as I'm aware. Miss Danoff was an employee of the production rather than Johnny Depp's employee. So this whole argument of bias or she's on the payroll would naturally fail in this instance. She is an objective third-party witness with no skin in the game. Finally, this is where the second piece of evidence ties in beautifully with Ms. Danoff's witness statement and with Johnny's version of events. This photograph. Apparently, as the text underneath it indicates, this photo was taken after filming Wrapped. And yes, in the photo are Johnny and Mr. Brooks, and they appear to be on good terms. This aligns with Miss Danoff's version of events as stated in her declaration. She says, later, after filming Wrapped at 12:31 a.m., April 13, 2017, per a time-stamped photograph, Mr. Depp and Mr. Brooks were about 5 feet from me and hugged. Mr. Depp said no hard feelings, and Mr. Brooks said what he said was in the heat of the moment. Then they both departed. And that was it. No hard feelings, no crazy altercation, no evidence whatsoever in support of Mr. Brooks's very far-fetched and very colorful allegations as laid out in his complaint. And this brings us to the settlement aspect. There is this nasty misconception around settlements. People think that if the defendant agrees to settle, then they are most definitely liable. Many people wrongly use the word guilty. It's not a criminal trial, so that's not the question here. This happened, of course, with Michael Jackson. Now, I have separate videos where I've gone in depth into Michael's 1993 allegations and the 2005 criminal trial, so I'm not going to go into any of that. But in 1993, when he agreed to settle over that incident, everyone took that as an admission of guilt, and his career and reputation pretty much started to take a nosedive from that point onwards. In fact, Michael Jackson has apparently been quoted as saying that if I knew that this was going to be the outcome, I would never have agreed to settle. So the answer is no. Johnny Depp is not admitting guilt or liability simply by agreeing to settle. From the perspective of a lawyer, I really want to help people understand that courts and the entire judicial system are very much pro settlements. In general, they are very much pro cases getting settled out of court, may it be through settlements or alternative dispute resolution, such as mediation, arbitration, etc. This is because courts operate on limited resources, and so they want to be able to divert their resources to the cases that need it most. And so if a case is able to be fairly and reasonably resolved outside of court, that is definitely the preference. Good lawyers advise their clients to accept settlements as long as they are reasonable. That is a very important proviso, but it needs to be a two-way discussion. Don't ever let your lawyer bully you into doing something that you really don't want to do. Having said that, if you fail to accept a settlement and you proceed to trial, and let's say you lose, the other party that offered to settle can move for a costs order to be made against you for refusing to settle. It's essentially a way of saying you had your chance and a reasonable offer of settlement was made to you, and yet you persisted, took this case to trial, wasted a lot of time and resources, only to end up losing anyway, or only to end up getting awarded less in damages than the amount that was offered to you. In Australia, at least, in our code of ethics, it is our responsibility to advise our clients to settle. We can't force them to settle. That would be unethical. But as I said, it is a part of a good and ethical lawyer's job to advise their clients to accept an offer to settle if it's reasonable and it would be in the best interest of their client to do so. Unfortunately, somewhere along the way, because of maybe a few notorious cases, people seem to think that accepting a settlement is an admission of guilt. This is a societal misconception that is very difficult to shake off. But I try to do my bit with this platform to help educate and to help people understand, especially if you find yourself in a position where you were made an offer to settle and it was a reasonable offer, most importantly, but you don't want people to think you're guilty and so you reject it. I really don't want anyone in the audience to be in that position. The second question has a much shorter answer, which is, will we ever get access to the terms of the settlement? Highly unlikely. The terms of a settlement are usually private. They're not public court filings that the public can gain access to. They are strictly between the parties involved, and for the most part, they will be kept confidential, and we, as members of the public, will most likely never know what the terms are. There are exceptions, but this is the general stance. And that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sticking around and being patient with me. I wish I had more time to make this more of a not full-time endeavor, but I wish I had the liberty to invest more hours into YouTube. But I do what I can. I do want to consistently strive for quality over quantity. I hope you all appreciate that. Speaking of a slight delay, the next video will cover the overall end to Amber Heard's post-trial motions. We had numerous updates in relation to that throughout the week. I wasn't able to get to filming, again, 12-hour workdays, but that means I get to make one nice finale, pending the appeal, of course. Because if there's one thing we can all say about Amber Heard, she does not let go. And with that, I am going to love you and leave you. Thank you so much for joining me. Have some more Leo kisses, because you can never have enough Leo kisses. And I'll catch you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.